For years, African leaders played it safe with the West, until now. As they start reclaiming what's rightfully theirs, the people are rising to back them like never before. Africa has been through centuries of foreign interference. Western powers have had their claws in the continent for as long as anyone can remember, controlling its resources, shaping its governments, and manipulating its future. But now, things are changing. One man, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, has emerged as a fierce symbol of defiance, standing tall against the West's endless attempts to dominate the region. And let's be clear, the West is scared of him. So scared that they've done everything in their power to discredit and destabilize his government. From assassination plots to constant media attacks, it's clear that Traoré represents more than just a leader. He's a beacon of hope for Africa's fight for sovereignty. But why is the West so desperate to bring him down? Will they be willing to do what they did to Thomas Sankara? But will locals let history repeat itself? Let's find out. A simple truth is that the West doesn't like Traoré because he's the antithesis of what they want in Africa. For decades, the West has been able to control Africa's leaders by dangling foreign aid and military support. But Traoré doesn't play that game. The moment he took power, he made it clear that Burkina Faso would no longer bow to Western pressure. He's not just saying no to foreign aid, he's saying no to the Western way of thinking. And that's exactly why they're coming for him. Let's rewind for a second. Take a look at Africa's history, and you'll see a disturbing trend. Leaders who dared to reject Western control, like Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso and Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, ended up dead or displaced. Why? Because these leaders were building their countries on principles of self-sufficiency, dignity, and sovereignty. They wanted to break the chains that kept Africa subservient to foreign powers. The West wasn't having it, and they did whatever they could to eliminate these threats to their dominance. President Traoré is cut from the same cloth. He's not just resisting foreign interference, he's forging new alliances with Russia and China, two countries the West has spent decades trying to vilify. And why are these relationships such a threat? Because if more African leaders start looking to China and Russia instead of Europe and the US, the West's grip on Africa will weaken. And that's a nightmare they can't afford. But the question remains, what lengths will the West go to stop this momentum? Traor faced many coup attempts but all failed, so now the powers are focused on assassination attempts. Yes, once again it is happening in Africa. The assassination attempt on President Traoré wasn't just a random act of violence, it was part of a well-coordinated plot to destabilize the country and undermine his leadership. Traoré's rise to power wasn't without its challenges, but this assassination attempt marked a turning point. It wasn't just about eliminating one man, it was about sending a clear message to anyone else who might think of following in his footsteps. Behind this plot was a group of disgruntled former military junta members, led by Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba. Damiba, who was ousted by Traoré after his failed leadership, had been trying to regain control. But this wasn't just an internal power struggle. It was a power struggle backed by external forces who saw Traoré as a direct threat to their control over Africa. But here's the kicker. This assassination attempt wasn't the first one. It was just the latest in a series of attempts to destabilize Traoré's government. But each time, he survived. And with every failed assassination attempt, his power grew. The more the West and its allies tried to bring him down, the stronger his position became. The real question is, why? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Why is Traoré such a threat that foreign powers are willing to go to such extremes to take him down? The answer to this question is not just about the man himself, but what his rise to power represents. A paradigm shift in Africa's geopolitical landscape. Ibrahim Traoré is not merely a leader of Burkina Faso. He is a symbol of the larger struggle for African autonomy, sovereignty, and self-determination in the face of centuries of foreign influence. His vision goes beyond the interests of one nation. It resonates with the entire African continent. That's why he's seen as such a threat, not just by Western powers, but by anyone who benefits from the status quo of Africa being subjugated and dependent on foreign influence. For the first time in decades, Traoré is unapologetically leading Burkina Faso toward reclaiming its agency, making it a bold example of what African countries can achieve when they stop bowing to the demands of external forces. The trajectory he's charting could inspire a broader shift, one that could fundamentally change the relationship between Africa and the West, as well as with the powers seeking to exploit the continent's resources. At the core of Traoré's threat is his commitment to undoing the decades-long system of dependency that has plagued Africa since colonial times. From foreign aid and trade agreements that lock African countries into unfavorable terms, to military interventions disguised as peacekeeping, the West has long treated Africa as a resource to be extracted and exploited, rather than a continent of independent, self-sustaining nations. What makes Traoré's leadership so revolutionary is his defiance against this system. He is pushing for a vision of Burkina Faso, and by extension, Africa, that no longer relies on Western financial support or military assistance. By strengthening relationships with Russia and China, Traoré is creating alternatives to Western-backed institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which have historically imposed crippling conditions on African countries. These alternative alliances provide economic cooperation without the strings attached. In a continent long dependent on foreign powers, this is nothing short of a game-changer. By refusing to align with the West, Traoré is sending a message that resonates far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Africa can chart its path without Western interference. This could inspire a domino effect, where other African nations begin to reconsider their relationships with former colonial powers, realizing they don't need to keep dancing to the West's tune. If other African leaders follow suit, this could undermine decades of Western dominance over the continent. But Traoré's potential to change Africa doesn't stop at economic independence. It's about reclaiming the narrative. For years, Africa has been portrayed in the Western media as a continent plagued by corruption, instability, and underdevelopment, a place in perpetual need of rescue. This narrative has been instrumental in justifying Western involvement in African affairs, from military interventions to economic exploitation. Traoré is challenging this narrative head-on. He's showing that Africa doesn't need rescuing. It needs to be left to its own devices to solve its problems. He's actively leading the charge to dismantle the imperialistic structures that have been in place for centuries, and doing so with the full support of his people. Burkina Faso's citizens didn't just vote Traoré into power. They rallied behind him during the protests, risking their safety to defend their sovereignty against the manipulation of foreign powers. This unity is a stark reminder that Africa's problems can be solved from within, through leadership that is accountable to its people, not to foreign interests. Traoré's bold shift in foreign policy isn't just significant for Africa, it's a direct challenge to the global power balance. The West, particularly the United States and European nations, have long considered themselves the dominant players in global geopolitics. However, Traoré's increasingly close ties with Russia and China signal a dramatic shift in this balance. It's no longer just about Western powers dictating terms. Africa is beginning to assert its agency and join the conversation as an equal. What Traoré understands, and what makes him such a threat, is that Africa holds significant strategic importance. It's home to vast natural resources, vital trade routes, and an expanding market of over 1.4 billion people. But for decades, these resources have been extracted with little benefit to the African people. Now, with countries like Russia and China offering new, mutually beneficial partnerships, Africa has an opportunity to use its resources and strategic location to its advantage, not just for the benefit of the West. If Traoré's vision succeeds, it could change the way the world looks at Africa, no longer as a passive recipient of aid, but as an active player on the global stage, capable of shaping its future and challenging the status quo. This shift has the potential to redefine global alliances and trade relationships, making Africa a more powerful force in international politics. And that is exactly why Western powers are willing to go to such extremes to stop him. At the end of the day, what makes Traoré such a threat is that he's showing Africa, and the world, that the West's dominance is not invincible. He's offering an alternative vision of how African countries can navigate the modern world. No longer is Africa bound to the will of former colonial powers. Traoré's leadership is about standing up, asserting sovereignty, and creating a future free from Western influence. If this message spreads, and if more African nations follow in his footsteps, the power dynamics that have been in place for centuries will begin to shift. Traoré is not just a threat to the West because of his leadership in Burkina Faso. He's a threat because he embodies the potential for a new Africa, one where the continent's resources are used for the benefit of its people, and where African nations no longer bow to foreign pressures. It's this very vision of a new, independent Africa that Western powers fear the most. If Traoré succeeds, the dream of African unity and independence becomes far more than just a dream. It becomes a reality that could change the entire global order. This is why they are willing to go to such extreme lengths to undermine him. For them, the rise of a truly independent Africa is a threat they can't afford to let succeed. Now, if you thought the assassination attempt was the most shocking part of this story, think again. The media's role in the battle for Burkina Faso's future has been just as significant, if not more so. Whenever the West wants to topple a leader, they turn to the media to manipulate public opinion. It's the oldest trick in the book, and they've used it time and time again. In the case of President Ibrahim Traoré, the Western media has been hammering home the narrative. He's a dictator. But don't buy it. Let's dive into the details, and we will show you exactly why the media's portrayal is as absurd as it is dangerous. Take, for instance, the reports from Human Rights Watch accusing the Burkinabe military of atrocities. Sure, on the surface, these reports look like a smoking gun. But when you dig a little deeper, things don't add up. Yes, the Burkinabe military is engaged in an intense fight against insurgent groups that have been running rampant in the region. But what the media fails to mention is the bigger picture. These groups are often manipulated and funded by external forces, looking to destabilize the region for their geopolitical gain. So, while the Burkinabe military is fighting for the country's survival, the media is quick to paint them as the villains. But that's not where the story ends. Here's the twist. The people of Burkina Faso aren't buying the media's narrative. Instead of swallowing the Western media's portrayal of Traoré and his government as oppressive and violent, the people have done something extraordinary. They've rallied behind their president. Thousands of Burkinabe citizens gathered in the streets, protesting outside the U.S. Embassy in Ouagadougou, demanding an end to foreign interference. But this wasn't just about showing support for their president, Ibrahim Traoré. It was much bigger than that. The people of Burkina Faso weren't merely backing their leader. They were rejecting the foreign powers that have tried to control their country for so long. This wasn't just a protest about Traoré's leadership. It was a resounding declaration of Burkina Faso's sovereignty. The message was loud and clear. We will no longer allow foreign powers to dictate our future. And here's where it gets even more powerful. This wasn't a one-off, a fleeting moment of anger that would fade the second the cameras stopped rolling. No, this was the beginning of a movement. A growing resistance to the forces of colonialism and imperialism that have plagued Africa for centuries. The citizens of Burkina Faso weren't just protesting. They were taking a stand against the very foundations of external control. They were telling their government and the world that they were in charge of their destiny now. They were reclaiming their power, fighting not just for Traoré's presidency, but for their right to self-determination. What Traoré has, that Sankara didn't, is a deep, unshakable foundation of public support. When the West targeted Sankara, it was a relatively isolated struggle. While his policies were revolutionary and empowering, the socio-political landscape wasn't as united, especially given the decades of Western influence over African governments. But today, things have shifted. Traoré isn't just the leader of a government. He's the figurehead of a broad-based resistance to foreign influence. The Burkinabe people have rallied behind him in ways that go far beyond mere political loyalty. They've united under the banner of reclaiming their country's sovereignty. The recent protests outside the U.S. Embassy in Ouagadougou were a clear message. The people of Burkina Faso are prepared to stand by their president, no matter the cost. Unlike Sankara's time, when the West had the advantage of manipulating internal divisions, Today's Burkina Faso is marked by a strong collective will. The protests weren't a flash-in-the-pan moment. They were the latest demonstration of a deep, entrenched national pride and resistance to foreign meddling. This is no longer just about one man. It's about an entire nation that refuses to accept being pawns in a global power struggle. The people of Burkina Faso have been through too much. Centuries of colonialism, decades of exploitation, and countless betrayals by foreign powers. To let that cycle continue. Traoré is not just their president, he is the embodiment of their fight for independence. If the West is planning on using the same methods to remove him, they'll be facing not just the strength of one leader, but the collective will of an entire nation that refuses to back down. One major difference between the current situation and Sankara's is the shift in global dynamics. While Sankara was isolated in his resistance to the West, Traoré has found powerful allies in Russia and China. These countries have moved away from the traditional Western-dominated frameworks that have oppressed Africa for centuries, offering Burkina Faso the opportunity to form new relationships based on mutual respect and shared interests. This shift in alliances strengthens Traoré's position significantly. He is no longer alone in his fight against Western imperialism. Russia and China have shown that they are willing to work with African nations on equal terms, providing an alternative to the exploitative relationships that have defined Western Africa dealings for so long. The support from these global players complicates the West's ability to stage a traditional coup or military intervention in Burkina Faso. No longer can they simply bully or manipulate a single African leader into submission. They now have to contend with a growing global alliance that sees the value in a self-sufficient Africa. While the West might still try to use its traditional tools of influence, whether through media campaigns, economic sanctions, or diplomatic pressure, it's clear that the game has changed. The people of Burkina Faso, having endured so much, are more unified and determined than ever before. They know that their future is at stake, and they are willing to stand by their leader to protect it. The real question is whether the West can accept this new reality. If the people of Burkina Faso, with the support of global allies, maintain their unity and resolve, they have the power to reshape their future and lead a wave of change across Africa. This isn't just about resisting one leader's downfall, it's about resisting a system of exploitation that has held Africa back for far too long. So, can the West succeed in silencing Burkina Faso's uprising? Maybe, if they're willing to use force. But can they break the resolve of an entire nation that has stood up and said, "We are in control of our destiny"? That's a much tougher question. If anything, Burkina Faso's resistance may be the beginning of a long overdue shift in Africa's relationship with the West. One where the people, not the foreign powers, determine their future. Do you think it is possible to win from Africa when the locals are on the battlefields? Can the West do anything with Traor? Let us know in the comments section. Will West still take the chance of attacking Traor, knowing what chaos it can bring? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.